Good morning and welcome to this webinar, which is the third one in the series of Kaute Talks by Aalto University. My name is Tuomas Olkku. I am an Executive Director of Kaute Foundation. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Aalto University for very good cooperation in organizing and producing the webinar series. Kaute Foundation supports research in business and technical fields. Our mission is to support sustainable renewal of Finnish businesses and the society. With these webinars, we want to bring together business people and the researchers and to create common understanding on what is needed in companies, as well as on what is happening in the research community at the moment and how will that shape the future. Today's theme is building a zero carbon society. The event is hosted by Professor Matti Liski from Aalto University. Matti will next introduce you to the topic and to our speakers today. Once again, welcome. Please participate through the chat and I hope you enjoy the discussion. Matti, welcome.
Thank you, Tuomas, and thank you, Kaute Foundation, for organizing this opportunity to discuss this important topic, how to build zero carbon society. My name is Matti Liski, and I'm a professor of economics at the Aalto University School of Business. It's my great pleasure to talk about this important topic, and it's always when there's an opportunity to cite Vladimir Lenin, I will do that first. Communism is Soviet power plus the electrification of the whole country. So the builders of the Soviet economy understood very well how important electricity is for developing the economy. It is really the case that electricity and energy is the ultimate general purpose technology that can shape our economies. And this is well understood currently as well, and the process is ongoing. If you look at the developing countries, those countries that are not the OECD countries, they are already consuming in total more energy than we are in OECD countries. And they are growing fast. In fact, when they reach our level of per capita consumption of energy, then the total global energy consumption will increase by factor 4. That is 4 times more than what we currently are consuming. That is a huge increase. And this electrification this time is different from the past because it has to be based on new carbon-free technologies, not only here in our economies, but also in these emerging economies. And that market is going to be big. The world is already investing €250 trillion annually in renewable energy technologies, and that process continues. If we think about technologies that are available for this transition, then we have to think about technologies that are scalable. And currently, the market thinks that the technologies are basically wind and solar. There are other alternatives, the alternatives that we will discuss today to some extent. Some of them have proven to be quite sustainable, but if they are scalable, the case is yet to be seen. If you think about this really vast transition that is ahead, not only here, but also globally, then you may ask that if this is possible. But my message is that we have seen this before. Think about, for example, countries like France and Germany, and look at them at the early 70s. They had very similar electricity systems in the sense that they were producing about the same amount of CO2 emissions per unit of energy, electricity produced. But about 10 years later, more than 10 years later, France had a system in place that produced only 1/10 of the emissions, but Germany remained the same. And this transition was huge. It took place in a decade. And of course, it was about transition to nuclear power. And that is what France is famous for. Maybe today that technology is not scalable in the same sense, but it illustrates that it is possible. And we have seen it many times before, even nuclear. Think about the transition to fossil fuels, to oil. Oil prices have never been that high as they were in the beginning of the oil industry, like 150 years ago. Then after all the investments we made in the exploration, in the exploitation of the assets, in delivery capacity, oil prices remained at low level for 100 years. So we have seen it before. But like I said, this time is different because we need to find new technologies and invest in those. And the demand for these new technologies is partly and to a large extent driven by social demands. So there's a government involved because the price of carbon emissions is not automatically there without a government. And in fact, the governments globally have been very active, introducing packages that are green packages, that are instruments that subsidize new technologies. They are taxes on old technologies. They are emission markets that introduce a price for emissions. And in fact, if you look at the numbers, then more than 20% of the global emissions are currently under some sort of carbon pricing. So it's not something that is not yet existent, but it is reality today. So these markets and the government policies, as well as the private aspirations for investing in these new technologies, they create a huge demand for these new technologies, and they also create a declining market for the old technologies. And it's not only about electricity, as Lenin was thinking about, and as electricity, of course, have been the sector where most of the activity has been taking place so far. But it covers also transportation, housing, together with electricity. And in fact, for Finland, for example, government has a very aspirational target to reduce carbon emissions from transportation by 50% during the coming decade, and then come close to zero emission transportation by 2045. And interestingly, here also in Finland, there is under preparation a system of tradable quotas for emission rights for transportation that would automatically reach this target. Similar designs are in consideration for the housing sector as well. And for electricity, we of course have that. These designs will not automatically solve all the problems. For example, local aspirations at city levels and municipalities, they are driven by different motivations. But today we are in an exciting position to have two guests who are living this reality, in the business reality of all of this. First we have Mika Johansson, who is from ST1, business unit lead for renewable energy. And Mika will tell you about this exciting business that they are currently transforming. And then we have Matti Rautkivi from Wärtsilä Energy. Wärtsilä is a company who has been in the long run in the energy business and is really a global actor. And we are excited to hear about that market and the lessons, not only globally, but also for Finland and for example, city of Helsinki. I'm sure Matti will have strong opinions about that. So let me first introduce Mika, and then please use the chat while Mika is talking. We'll collect questions, and then we will bring them, take them on board while we'll have the discussion part. So Mika, please, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Matti, and thank you Aalto University and County Foundation for having me. Good to be here. Building a zero-carbon society is an extremely fascinating and complex topic. I'm very excited and privileged to be here with you to discuss about the different aspects of the energy transition. Hopefully I'll manage to bring you interesting point of views from energy companies' perspective and shed a light to our thinking and actions, but also to the challenges we face when we are renewing our value chain for more sustainable one. ST1's vision is to be the leading producer and seller of CO2-aware energy. We want to be in the driver's seat in the energy transformation. Last year, our investments in renewable energy were 50 million euros and R&D expenditure 15 million euros. Approximately 1 billion euros of our turnover came from renewables, equaling 19% of the total. In a context of global climate crisis and the loss of biodiversity, these numbers are small, but our actions in renewables arena have put us into the same tables and markets with the biggest energy companies and technology providers in the world. Thus, we have gained good understanding of the time horizon and the investments needed in the energy system transformation. For example, we are scanning for the most promising conversion technologies for solid waste to advanced biofuels together with leading technology providers in the field. Time span for the projects like these is 5 to 10 years, as the technology readiness level is not mature yet. And the cost of development and investment is hundreds of million euros per plants. And big projects like these, we would need dozens of just to meet EU short-term targets. Zooming in from global to local, how are our Nordic societies doing? We can say that our business environment here is definitely the most ambitious in terms of climate targets. Indeed, the role of politics is to set the target and create regulative environment for businesses to operate in. We are sharing the sense of urgency. By all means, we need to act now. At the same time, we hope for politics that allows businesses to use the most effective tools to reduce CO2 from the atmosphere, and in doing so, to build knowledge and competence that can be commercialized and exported to the global markets. This is how Finland can be bigger than its size in climate actions. Making things more concrete, I'll give you an example. Nearly all the Finnish political parties have committed to cut down the transportation sector emissions by 50% by 2030. The target has been set. One of the regulative tools used for reaching the target is a biofuel mandate. The way it works is that all the fuel distributors must deliver a fixed percentage of bioenergy from the overall volume that they are delivering to the market. This year the percentage is 18 in Finland. By 2030, the level is increased up to 30%, whereas EU level target is around 10% currently. Similar high mandates are in place in Sweden and Norway as well. Given our market position as a liquid fuel distributor, we are probably one of the most obligated companies in the world. In theory, the model works well. The obligated parties will find the most effective ways to meet the mandate. However, in practice, currently there is only one option available to meet the growing mandate: using renewable diesel, HVO. Renewable diesel is in short supply. The cost of CO2 reduction ton is hovering around $400 per ton of CO2. Compared to European Union emission trading system carbon price, it is almost 10 times more. HVO producers are making extremely high margins, which are attracting a lot of investments into a new production capacity. One could say that the market is working. The challenge is that there is not enough feedstock for growing demand. HVO is produced from mainly imported raw materials, such as Chinese used cooking oil or Indonesian palm oil fatty acids, and the global potential for sustainable feedstock is limited. The high target has resulted that more than half of the global HVO production is used in the Nordics currently. From environmental and taxpayers' point of view, it can be challenged whether renewable diesel produced from Chinese used cooking oil is an effective way to tackle climate change in the Nordic countries. Having said that, and coming to the next point in my speech, our role and responsibility in reducing CO2, that is effectively to make smart investment decisions. We are also building a renewable diesel production plant in Gothenburg, Sweden. It is a very logical business decision, an attractive investment in the current legislative environment. However, that is not the type of a game changer investment that truly would reduce CO2 emissions globally. From a strategic leadership point of view, exploit, explore, expand framework gives a tool to analyze the challenge in transformation business, the balance between short-term cash flow and entering new uncertain areas. The most difficult question for company in our position is how to get the timing right. At which point of the technology cycle is the right moment to invest into a new technology, for example, synthetic fuels production. If you're too early, you pay the high price when the market or technology is not ready, but if you're too late, you are in risk of losing your business, and above all, you are not reducing CO2 emissions. In ST1, there's always been strong entrepreneurial spirit and will to do things. As a great example is Otaniemi Deep Heat Geothermal Project. We have drilled 2 world's deepest holes down to 6.4 kilometers. Nobody has done that before, and we are really doing many things for the first time. However, it's no big secret that the project has delayed and cost way more than originally budgeted. However, we believe that in Otaniemi we are really solving global energy challenges. Now the EU has a $1 billion chance to drive the development towards zero carbon society. In doing so, it is important to carefully analyze what do we actually need to transform. We go wrong if we see this black and white, only fossil and renewable. Transformation doesn't happen in silos. For example, liquid fuel infrastructure is equally suitable for the distribution of renewable and synthetic fuels versus the building of completely new infrastructure such as charging infra for electric cars. From organization's point of view, it's about getting key resources and competencies, business models and culture to support the transition. Equally important is to understand what are the completely new set of skills that the organization needs to learn. For example, commodity trading and supply expertise are also needed in the renewables arena to create functioning markets. And another example, in oil and gas exploration, core competence drilling can now also be used in geothermal energy projects. To conclude, in regard to building a zero-carbon society and EU's Green Deal, 3 points. First, to make stimulus effective, we need to find ready-to-invest projects in renewable sector now still in the middle of crisis. Secondly, the key is whether the investments are directed to R&D efforts that creates new globally scalable solutions to reduce CO2. And thirdly, businesses need policies that reduces CO2 globally. Climate change doesn't recognize borders.
Thank you, Mika. We have now, you have an opportunity to ask questions using chat. And while we're waiting for those, I have some questions for Mika. And I pick up one of those 3 items that you had in the end. You have this, you have an exciting company because you have this, you have at the core of the business model to explore these new technologies, and at the same time, your core business, where the cash flow is coming from, is very traditional fuel business, and both of them are, of course, very relevant for the climate problem. And if I first ask about this explorative project that you have in Otaniemi, which is really exciting. I visited the site, and I'm also quite impressed by the costs and the limits that you are exploring there in terms of how deep the hole is and so forth. So, what do you think that? What would it take to make this scalable? If you think about in Finland, in the local context, communities, municipalities are facing big challenges when they are trying to move away the heat distribution systems away from the old-time systems and sources of fuel. So how do you think? Is this scalable? And what kind of institutional solutions should be there to make it scalable?
Yeah, thanks. Good question. Well, I think the philosophy behind the project is that in core of the Earth there's massive energy storage. It's practically unlimited. What we are trying to achieve is the proof of concept, and we have chosen probably the most difficult conditions in the whole world to drill through the Finnish granite down to 6.4 kilometers. But it's really something that kind of in the heating sector, we should get rid of burning things. And geothermal energy is scalable solutions that allows us to produce heat without burning and without creating the CO2 emissions. So for us, in order to make it scalable, is really to kind of now make the proof of concept in Otaniemi, and after that move to the next concept, the next projects.
And you think it really could change the landscape, how the local municipalities, how they look like after maybe 10 years, 15 years from this point, when you look to the future, that you think that this is something that we could see in all, let's say, the 15 biggest cities in Finland?
Yeah, for sure. I think that is a solution that could definitely work in Finland in different bigger cities. Also, geothermal energy doesn't necessarily need to always be in that scale that we go down to 6 kilometers. We are also having heat pumps that kind of can utilize the energy that you can find in, for example, 300 meters. So we can go middle deep geothermal project, which are around 2 kilometers. But when we are doing the Otaniemi project, we are gaining the expertise that we can utilize in all of the depths and then make the geothermal energy more accessible and economical, more viable.
Yeah. Well, if I may turn to your third point, which is my favorite point as well, I kind of touched that as well, that government policies are very important in shaping the business environment. Not only solving the climate problem, but also allowing companies to find solutions that are the best solutions for the society. So, and you discussed the problems with the mandates, biofuel mandates, and then if you think about transportation sector, we economists at Aalto University, we have proposed a system where the government should, perhaps on top of these other policy instruments, use a quota system where the fuel distributors would have to buy an emission right, and there would be a limited amount of these rights, and then the government would control the amount of rights, and with that you would automatically reach the target, the reduction target. And then there would be a market price, and that would be like a standard market-based system. The alternative is that you have these policies that are directly targeting technologies, like the mandate is one. So if you think about these two polar solutions, so what do you think, what is the best for business? What are the sort of benefits you see in the market-based solution for pricing emissions for the society perhaps, and also for the business, as compared to the alternative approaches?
Thanks. Good question. Well, I guess if the question is that which one is more beneficial for the business, then it's a little bit like, what business are you in? I mean, now what we see in the transportation sector is that the price is extremely high for CO2 reduction, and it favors the companies that are producing such a renewable fuels, for instance. However, we know the limitations on the feedstock side, and kind of our message for the policymakers is that we need to expand the tools how you can fulfill the mandate or meet the emission trading reduction quotas, and I think that's the core of it, that we need to have wisdom in policy making to have a wide range of tools that you can apply in this type of a quota system, and in that extent it's definitely better that the politicians are not selecting the technology, but the system is actually technology neutral, and then the obligated players or the participants in this emission trading system, then they can freely choose the most effective tools to reduce CO2 emission. If we have the same tools that we have currently today, then actually it doesn't make that big of a difference if we change the actual law or the obligation, as we are still pricing the reductions based on the same kind of a marginal cost of reducing the CO2, which is then renewable diesel.
Good. I very much agree, and it's interesting that when I wrote my PhD thesis a long time ago, these were just academic ideas, and but now it's good to see that it's also the business community who thinks that this is the way forward, to have the market-based solution, and we have some questions here. Like Heikki Hassi was asking that, do you see that it is realistic to assume that the full cost of removing fossil fuels, removing fossil CO2 from the atmosphere will be added to the price of fuels? So I think the question is that, well, first of all, the question is that what is the right price for CO2? And we could argue that there should be only one global price. And currently we are, like you also indicated, that by having different policies and different targets in place in different places, we actually implement different prices in different locations. Although it's a global problem, so we should have only one price. How does this in your business, because you are operating globally and you see one price in California for emissions, one price in Europe. How do you see this? This relates to the question of what Heikki is asking here.
Yeah, I very much agree that in a perfect world, there should be only one price of a CO2 because it's a global crisis and really doesn't recognize borders or any type of checkpoints. If we look at this from the moon, definitely there should be only one CO2 price. However, we all know that the practicalities and the political situation is not such that it would allow only one marketplace. I've been there, participating in the market, for example, in California, sourcing renewable diesel there. They have a different mechanism and different set of rules. However, once again, when we see that there is a shortage of one commodity, then kind of that in a global market finds actually it's the same price everywhere you go, although it takes a bit longer to market to adapt. I would say that what we need is more flexibility between the sectors, and that would allow us to use the most effective tools. If we are not breaking all the way the sector borders, then at least introducing a carbon marketplace where you can then sell your negative emissions, and companies like us, we could then use at least part of the obligation by sourcing the emission trading or the CO2 reduction from such a marketplace. That would lead to a kind of a more effective market.
Thank you, Mika. So we have a few more technical questions here related to technologies, because you come from this innovative company. Maybe this is the right place to see. So what do you think about having a transition? Ali is asking that what do you think about having what is called in between of transition phase of coal power plant to generate green / blue hydrogen before shifting 100% to hydrogen in an existing plant from technical and economic perspectives? Is this a scenario that is familiar to you?
Yes, certainly we are looking into different ways to produce hydrogen and the hydrogen economy. I think I would say that we need to be really careful that whatever we do within that we base it on science and we really are making CO2 reductions. However, then what I was saying on the keynote speech is that definitely this is not a question of black and white. We have fossil and synthetic and biofuels in the same systems, and I think that in the transition period we don't have a perfect solution yet available for all the cases. But really always being very careful that we do real CO2 emissions that are helping us reducing the CO2 from the atmosphere really in a global place.
Yes, that is something. I want to connect this to your earlier answer related to the market mechanisms. In particular, when you are in a small country like Finland, you are a global player, of course. But if you think about as a country, and we're thinking about achieving the target in the best possible way for the society, then there's a particularly good case for market-based solution that is technology neutral. So when we're pricing the emissions and the market is seeing the price, then all the actors in the market, companies, consumers, they are free to choose the technologies that allow the best and the cheapest solutions for avoiding the price of emissions by becoming clean. And it's impossible for us to predict what are the winning technologies. You are in the business of exploring these possibilities, and you are in a position to respond to the prices in the market. But the policymakers should create this institution that there is a price, and then the market solves it, rather than thinking that the policymaker decides what is the winning technology and then starts to committing public resources to it. So let's see. We have other technology questions. There's about question about there's plenty of excess heat energy available in the industry, such as steel production and chemical industry. That is certainly true, and I suppose there are plans to exploit that further. You may comment on that as well. But then the question continues that in Sweden, such heat is already used for heating local municipal areas. Shouldn't we invest more into collection of this type of heat sources and utilize such waste heat streams rather than perhaps going underground? So what do you think?
Well, I think we need three things, and I think that the low-hanging fruit here is the energy efficiency and really using this type of excess heat. And I think our next speaker is kind of more familiar with all the details in these type of processes. But then in addition, we need a renewable energy, and also we need negative emissions. And we need all of the three. But as mentioned, then I think that the low-hanging fruit is really to collect some of the excess heat and make our energy systems more efficient. And I think that they are not conflicting ones, but they are really complementing each other's.
Yes. Perhaps the same infrastructure can even serve both ends. So yeah, we very much agree with the question. I think it's time for us to thank Mika for this first part, and then Mika comes back later on. But we are now inviting our second keynote speaker and participant to the discussion, Matti Rautkivi from Wärtsilä Energia. From Wärtsilä Energy, I should say, and Matti will. I'm sure Matti will tell us about how Wärtsilä is as a global player in the energy markets, and we are looking forward to hear what are the implications for Finland as well. Welcome, Matti.
Thank you, Matti. Always good to have two Mattis in the same room. Yeah, I'm Matti Rautkivi with Wärtsilä, and many of you probably know Wärtsilä, but a global player in the energy and marine business, and our strategy on Wärtsilä level can be said in one word: it's decarbonization. So how we help our customers in the globe to decarbonize both the marine sector and the energy sector. And I'm representing the energy sector, which is of course I would say super interesting phase and extremely big opportunity. People can look this as a challenge perspective, that how we start to decarbonize, how we do the decarbonization, but I'm looking at it more from the opportunistic and opportunity perspective, and let me tell you why. So a couple of years ago, 2018, we within Wärtsilä Energy launched our vision towards 100% renewable world. At that time, when we look the world, we started to see already what is really behind this whole transition, and it's people think that it's reducing emission, which is of course the super important thing and the critical here. But actually, we noticed that it's driven already in many places by the cost. That the really cheap renewable energy was available, is available, and will be available for the energy production. So in the countries for example, like Senegal, which is a good example of where we have really good wind conditions and really good solar conditions, it is cheaper to produce energy with renewables than with a new coal plant. Exactly the same happened just 3 weeks ago in South Africa, where they were planning 6,000 megawatt of coal plants. Now it turned to be massive amount of wind, solar, and flexible generation. So when you have this vision, that vision is a vision, but as a technology company like Wärtsilä, why we need this type of visions, that we look 10, 15 years ahead, is that the market, the technology development takes time. And you need to understand that how does the world look like in 10, 15 years, and what is creating value there for the society, for the customers, that you have the time. You need to make the investments to develop technologies that are available during that time. And that's the path that we need to take. Understand that what this transition takes and what type of technologies is needed, and especially what is creating value. And one thing that actually will boost this and is boosting is already is the last year, 2020. Of course, it was a terrible year in many ways during the COVID-19, which is unfortunately still continuing. But the last year, the world basically stopped. And if we look at global emissions, I think it was the first time since Second World War when the emissions went down. I think depending on the source, it was around 7% globally that we were able to reduce emissions globally. And now there is 7-8 billion people who understands that how we did this. What actually it took to reduce emissions by 7%. We stopped traveling. Factories were closed. Shops were closed. People were staying at home. And we mutually achieved that 7% emission reduction. Great achievement. But when we look now at what we need to do by 2050, if and when we need to meet that 1.5 Celsius Paris Agreement target, is that we need to reduce emissions every single year from 2020 to 2050, 7%. Every single year to do the same reduction. So yes, we stopped flying last year, but on top of that, we need to do something additional this year, and then the additional something next year. And when you realize that, you understand that we can't continue in the same way producing energy, producing our industrial goods as we have done in the past. So everything will change. And of course, this can be a scary thing that okay, my life will change and it will be worse. But actually, I claim that it will be better. And we already see now the first real signs of this, that how the industry will change, how it will revolutionize the whole industrial sectors, like the steel production, car manufacturing. We will have electric vehicles, and even the steel will be CO2 free in the future. So it's an opportunity. Yes, things will change, but it is an opportunity. And when we understand this, that it is an opportunity, and there are tools and ways to catch that opportunity, then every company, every country, every individual is in a strong position, and that's what we do within Wärtsilä. And as an example, that what we have done now during the last couple of years is that investing heavily in energy storage, which is one of the good examples that will grow massively over the next decade. And people think that Wärtsilä it's an engine manufacturer, and we are producing engines for the ships and power plants, which definitely as business an important business today and in the future, as that kind of a thermal backup generation will be needed. It's not using fossil fuels in the future, but it's using those synthetic fuels that Mika, for example, touched in the previous presentation. But the energy storage is already happening today, and just last year, Wärtsilä was one of the biggest player in the world to provide energy storage for utilities. You know the names like Tesla and Siemens, but Wärtsilä was actually one of the biggest one last year. And what we are talking here is that it's already a massive business. It's not something that we also thought that this 100% renewable vision will take decades to happen when it's providing business. But because of this situation now with the COVID-19, the opportunity to understand that, okay, things will change. There is a global understanding now that what this takes to change things. There is a global will to do this. We see way bigger projects and taking place already today than just a couple of years. Just 2 weeks ago, signed a deal for more than 200 megawatt, 400 megawatt hours of energy storage in Texas. And remember, there was a tech crisis in Texas just a couple of weeks before that, so things happen fast. And when we are talking about 200 megawatts, I think the biggest energy storage in Finland is 6 megawatts. So the scale, what we see globally in these different places, is real. It's definitely industrial scale. And this is happening in the countries like United States, it's happening in Caribbean, it's happening in Africa, it's happening in Europe, it's happening all over the place. And that's why we want to play as a player here in this catching this global opportunity. Well, talking about Finland that Matti mentioned, yes, I got some opinions and about that, and definitely want to discuss about those. But as in Finland, what we see, what we can do here, and from the technology company perspective, let's recognize that this is an opportunity. Let's recognize that that we need to act to stop the climate change. We need to decarbonize, and we need to understand that decarbonization is an opportunity because we have great companies here, and we are able to develop these technologies that the world needs. It's needing those already today. It's using those already today, and companies like us, our role is then to scale it, export these great things what we develop here together, and at the same time how we are able then to utilize those technologies first for the benefit of Finland and the Nordic countries, but then in the global perspective. Yeah, thanks. Should we continue, Matti, with the?
Thank you, Matti. It's always a pleasure hear Matti talking, and in particular such a professional Matti from this who is in practice thinking about how to solve this problem. So let's try to first think in very concrete terms that what you do, because you mentioned that it is a business opportunity. And I see that you operate in all corners of the world, many times in those parts of the world that are really emerging economies, where I mentioned myself that the demand growth for energy consumption is huge because there is the middle class arising, and they need the home appliances that we have. We are consuming here energy and electricity, and once they reach this level, what we are having here, then there's just a huge demand to be satisfied, and you enter the scheme, and you provide them system level services, right?
Yes.
That is like you show the path to renewables, and then you provide your own technology solutions complementing that. Is that the way it works?
Yeah. So first of all, you need to understand how does the future system looks like. And let's take South Africa as an example. I mentioned South Africa, and there we started to discuss about that, I think 6 years ago. So 5-6 years ago, when we realized that renewable energy is actually an opportunity for countries like South Africa, really good wind conditions, good solar conditions. And at that time, they were planning to build 10 gigawatts of new coal capacity just to meet that increasing demand in the country. And it takes time, it takes effort to analysis, convince people that that this is the right way to do. And just 6 years later now, they are actually, instead of building that coal capacity there, they are investing in renewable energy. They are investing in flexible generation. They are investing in energy storage. So that's then providing opportunity for companies like Wärtsilä. However, at that point, when that opportunity is there on the table, you need to have the winning technology. You need to be the best there because you are competing in the global market. We can't assume that we open a market there and it's a monopoly for us. Nobody likes monopolies, like. So then we need to have the winning technology there. So it's a twofold game. You need to convince about the system level that what makes sense, and then when it's the time to actually do the project, you need to be the best one there and win. So it's in two level. system level, but then on the technology. It's not enough that we talk what would be the best system for the world. You are not selling anything with that. You need to do that and then be the best one with the technology, and that's what we.
Right. So at the first level, you could basically tell that you can choose whatever technology you want, but then it is our solution.
You can be a professor there and say that what is the best one, but,
yes.
but then somebody else is paying your salary, not the technology provider.
Okay, but if we go back to the basics, that like we've been discussing, that there should be a price on emissions, and so we're setting a price on something that was free before, and now we're suddenly having more. It's more costly to use these fuels that we would be perhaps otherwise still be using. So how can we? So your vision is 100% renewable energy system. Is it also 100% more expensive to the consumers in the end?
No, absolutely not. Actually, it is cheaper, and that's especially once again for those developing countries and also for Finland. But it is definitely cheaper, and that's the big thing here. That it's about emissions, but it's about cost-efficient decarbonization. That how we do that cost efficiently, because then there is less reasons to resist the transition, and it goes faster. And that's what we want, to have this really, really fast and in efficient way. So absolutely not. It won't be more expensive. Actually, I claim that in many places in the world it would be cheaper to build this kind of new 100% renewable system, and it's not. We shouldn't compare that to the existing system, but really that how does the future system looks like? But if you compare only on the cost to cost level, it will be cheaper for the consumers. The role of consumer will be different. How you participate in the market, how you can interact with the different players. But definitely it will be. It's not going to be so costly.
So if we come back to the Nordics and if we think about what's happening here, when we talk about your core business, electricity, in the energy part, so what we have seen here in the Nordics is that we have seen not so much solar, but more wind. It's more than 10% of our annual consumption already covered by quite a bit more, I think, already. Mm-hmm. It varies, of course, from year to year, but I would think that it's on average like a bit more than 10% of the annual load that is being covered by wind power production, and that has replaced these old technologies in the market. And wind power comes with zero running costs, yes. So that's why it's always going to be there, and it's depressing. When you have more capacity in the market, it's going to depress the prices. And we have seen that renewables have led actually to the collapse of prices in some places, and that's really bad for the old technologies. Mm-hmm. We could bring the nuclear investments to the picture, but that's a sensitive topic. We don't have to go down.
No,
let's see.
I wrote a book.
Let's leave it to the final discussion. But but that means that the prices are sometimes very, very low here in the Nordics or somewhere else. And you are in this business of exploiting that. Yes. The storage. There are many ways to exploit that fact that sometimes you get electricity for free almost. But is this the main reason for you to enter this storage business? That you think it is an opportunity to globally somehow see these price differences, or is it more like if you look at a particular system like you mentioned South Africa, and you see that it is just reasonable to have that part of the local package when you are not only providing like balancing power to serve those situations when you have a shortage, but also to shift power from one hour to another. Is it more like a local solution from your perspective? Well,
yeah, we look at it's a global solution because technology is global, and then it will be exploited in all of the systems, I think, and energy storage, especially with the solar-dominated system, there it provides more value because you have more cycles. You have a daily cycle, so you can.
It's predictable.
It's predictable, and the utilization factor of energy storage.
Even I can predict that the sun will not shine. Only midsummer, of course.
Yeah. But let's put it as an interesting example about these price differences and what happened. And once again, last year, 2020. in the springtime in Germany, the price or the demand went down around 7%. So we got a lower demand than ever. And at the same time, wind was blowing, sun was shining still. So we had more renewables in the system than ever before. The percentage of renewable, the share of renewable was higher. And we started to see negative prices in Germany. So we saw more negative prices in Germany and more price volatility than basically ever before during the COVID-19. Why? Because the percentage of renewables, the share of renewables was higher. So, and of course, coal plants were making, I think, 40% less money, nuclear less money. They were making actually loss because of the prices at that point. Energy storage was making 25% more margin than previous year. And flexible gas was making more money than the previous year. So it's what happened last year in Europe or globally. It's a crystal ball to the future. We had a system where we had more renewables than what we assumed that we will have in 2030. We saw what happened to the prices. Prices went down. There was more price volatility, and that led to the opportunity for energy storage investments. And now, just a year later, those investments start to happen. So I don't say that it's not a bad thing. It's a nature of this kind of future system. Once again, the future system will look different. You need to behave in the marketplace differently. And there is room for new technology. That's what we want, that new technologies who are able to exploit the opportunities in the new system will be deployed.
Yeah, that's an interesting insight. And also, I think what is interesting in your market is that it might be this transition more difficult for us because we have the old system so sophisticated to make this transition to the new technologies rather than if you consider developing or emerging economies where you are building the system from the scratch. So it kind of might. At least that's what I heard from the Finnish system operator, that actually if you would build the new system from the scratch, you would build the renewable, 100% renewable system, like the type of vision that you have. So in some sense, it's kind of natural that your main market is somewhere else. Then
No, and of course, if we talk about the opportunity, Finland is a small country compared to what is the opportunity in the developing countries. It's just a massive opportunity. So absolutely, and I don't say that this is a more sophisticated system. I think it's just that what is actually preventing us moving faster is the existing players in the market. They have invested massively and they want to defend their position.
Yes.
Somebody say that it was a smart investment to build a nuclear power plant 15 years ago. Right, and still, but if you look at how the world has changed in 15 years or 20 years, it's a massive change here. Is it still a good investment? You hold it because you have invested massive amount of money and you want to defend those type of things. And nuclear is just one example there, but there are coal plants, there are different type of investments. So there where you need to meet the new demand, it's increasing 8% like in Thailand, 8-9% per year. You need to do something anyway.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So, and then you choose the best one. So you okay, that the world has changed, it's changing continuously. Where do we invest? You don't need to lock into something for 10, 15 years.
Yes.
You need to act and you choose the best path there.
Yeah, I think the sophisticated is perhaps not the right word, but it's a different logic. The old time system that you have very centralized production and then distribution, and consumers are passively just taking or demanding whatever they need, and then the system is managed in a very centralized manner. Whereas this approach, what you mostly have, is more decentralized.
Or take an example. Electric cars is a good example. If you are now 18 years old, you never drove a car before. You would say the electric car, it's easy to go to McDonald's, charge your car there, or spend 15 minutes in the parking lot, watch Netflix when you're charging your car. Not a big deal.
Yeah.
For us who are used to that you can charge 100 kilowatt hours of fuel in your tank in less than a minute. It's like that this will never work. This is so different. But it's not about the technology that it's actually better and cleaner for sure, but it's about the mentality and about that where we are used to.
Yes.
That's something that we need to continuously change. It's not every time you come with a new idea, like I said in 2018 that the wind is cheaper way to produce electricity in Finland. Everybody thought that I'm crazy. Now last week Talouselämä in Finland head cover, Finland is the El Dorado of wind.
Yes.
Same thing about the heat pump, same thing about the synthetic fuels, but in the beginning it is a challenge, but you need to be you need to be there and provide the information, have the debate and discussion there.
Yeah, so it's also the attitude of the consumers, and we old timers are bad in doing multitasking. So we can only do one thing at a time, which is to fill the tank and then do the next thing. And maybe we can gradually invite Mika to come here as well. And meanwhile, I might ask from Matti, for example, there was a question from Sana that should we, when we think about the transition into renewable energy production, should we also think about reducing energy consumption in order to build a sustainable economy? So is that in any way in Wärtsilä's package? Or you see, for example, the storage technology as a way to perhaps partly meeting this goal of reducing total consumption? How would you see? Or is it part of just if you create an efficient system where you can you have more responsive parties, then you are actually also achieving this target to some extent?
Yeah, and now we need to distinguish energy and electricity here, and I think that's something that for sure energy consumption we should try to minimize and be cost efficient as possible. And once again, electric car is a good example of that. That it's more efficient way to transport than with the reciprocating engine car. But it has its limitations there. So one thing here is that what will definitely increase is the amount of electricity in the global system. Now, I had just an example when we had a global mining company that has mining operations, I think, in more than 40 countries globally, and how they see the demand for electricity in their mines is going to increase massively. Not the energy consumption, because the trucks are using diesel today, the power plants are burning diesel there, but we will actually, what we're going to do there is the decarbonization for them. So put 70% renewables for the energy production, convert the trucks using electricity there, so the electricity consumption will go up. You need more batteries there, you need more solar panels there, but the overall efficiency of the system, once again, is definitely more efficient. So in that sense, yes, we are in the business, and the energy reduction and energy efficiency is definitely one of the key metrics there. But at the same time, the electricity consumption will definitely go up.
Right. Then there's a question. This is to Wärtsilä, but Mika can also, if you see that this is relevant to you as well. Does Wärtsilä see hydrogen as part of the opportunities at hand currently? How about storing the hydrogen as the energy carrier? Well, this is a classical question. Any responses?
Well, I can start about it. It's related to Wärtsilä. So we have also announced a couple of projects here in Finland and globally related to hydrogen. One in Vaasa together with the local players to build a electrolyzer capacity, storing hydrogen, using that in the engines and as an energy carrier for local transportation. And the second one is here actually close by in Vantaa with Vantaa Energia, where hydrogen is used as an energy carrier combined with the CO2 and produce synthetic methane there. And then, of course, in the marine side, the ammonia is one of the things that we are exploring now. And already the engines today that are diesel engines are actually able to burn ammonia. So that's one of the things for our customers is that the flexibility, because nobody knows that what will be the winner in the fuel side today. So with the engines they put in the ships today, the ship's lifetime is 40-50 years, and they want to run those engines 40-50 years. So they can burn diesel, they can burn biodiesel, gas, ammonia, hydrogen, whatever is available, what is the cheapest. So that gives the flexibility for the end our customer to choose then that what is the cheapest renewable fuel in the market.
That's interesting. The complementarities that you have in these two main business branches. Is there any relevance for you?
Definitely. I mean, in this energy system transition, electrification is in a large scale is definitely needed. Then the question is that whether that's a direct electrification or indirect electrification through hydrogen or other potential energy carriers. Then I think that's something that Matti discussed quite a bit already. That kind of how to do that in different applications. I think kind of the big challenge really is that kind of when we are talking about really terawatt scale. How do we move electricity in time and place? And at the moment, definitely synthetic fuels are providing a very interesting opportunity there. And when we are talking about applications or fuels like methanol or methane, or even using Fischer-Tropsch to kind of further refine those to jet fuel, then that is definitely an opportunity that we see that will provide a big kind of that has a big role in the future.
Good, thank you. This is if I may connect back to the beginning that we are in an exploration phase where we are exploring these different technologies, but then when you really think about technologies that are mature enough to be scalable to solve these system level problems, currently we have wind and solar, and then the technologies that you need to complement those. From an economist perspective, I always want to emphasize this, that if you have a market in place that puts a price on the problem, which is the carbon emissions, then it's up to the market to decide what technology wins. It's not an opinion. It's really what is a sort of survival and winning technology in the market is something that we just don't know. And but of course, there are government policies can have a role in sponsoring different technologies, because you need some scale, like networks. If you think of electric cars, for example, you need the charging networks, and there's a reason to, once you see the winning technology emerging, to perhaps to sponsor the adoption of the technology. But now we come to the really important question that often arises here, that what's the role of nuclear? There are a couple of questions from Atte and Eero there. For example, by Atte Harjanne, that none of the IPCC model pathways are 100% renewable. They include nuclear. So by default, excluding technologies makes transition more expensive and slower. So I think the point is here that we should not rule out nuclear by default. I think this is correct. I'd like to hear from your on that, but let's see. There was also Eero was pointing that now the question disappeared, but the pointing the same, that nuclear might have an important role here. My comment as an economist that okay, the market can invest in nuclear, but it doesn't for some reason. Right. And I think the reason has to do with money. Yes. So, but what's your take on this nuclear issue?
Well,
from your business perspective.
I don't know if it's a business perspective or individual perspective, but I think I would say both. And as said, markets should decide, and then what is creating value in the market should decide. So definitely we shouldn't rule any technologies out. That what is the cheapest way and the cheapest and the fastest way to decarbonize? Let's use that one. And we are looking different technologies, and also in the nuclear space, the small modular reactors and all those have been on the table. However, at this point, when we don't just talk about plan what will happen in the 15 years. That's part of the job. That's part of what is the technology bet what we take for that 15 years. But we are delivering decarbonization services already today for our customers. And in that scenario, what we have done globally, there hasn't been market-driven nuclear projects in those places. They are happening once again in China and in many places. Is the market-driven or something else? You can judge that what is the best way to do that. And in the same way in Finland, Finnish society, is that really the fastest way if the nuclear power plants are 20 years late, 15 years late, cost 10 billion. If you put it in the paper and calculate as an investment, I think it's not really the cheapest way cheapest way to do it. But if that comes available as a cheap alternative to decarbonize, absolutely. But is it there today? Time will tell.
I think Eero's question was about the small scale nuclear. Have you, in your global experiences, have you seen?
Yes, and we are and analyze that also. Once again, interesting technology, not available today. We can't deploy that today. And then what was discussed here about the cash flow? That okay, what type of business we are providing today? It's not there. It's not available for deployment for the project. So when it comes available, it's working. It's feasible. Absolutely. Then we should scale it. Definitely. Is it Wärtsilä's role or somebody else's role? But is it there today? No, it's not.
Yeah, I think that the future definitely is in renewables. The potential in wind and solar is great. Maybe bringing in one kind of a rather detailed thing related to kind of CO2 in our electric production and electric grids in the Nordics, because what we are looking is really kind of coming up with a new project for synthetic fuels production. But when we look at our markets, Finland, Sweden and Norway, then we have the average CO2 grams per megawatt hour is different between these countries. Norway is almost 100% renewable. They have the hydro and hydro reservoirs, and then but in Sweden they have a nuclear power and then more kind of a biomass used in the electricity production. And in practical point of view, when we are looking at the project, then Finland has the highest amount of CO2 in the electricity production, and therefore the premises to invest into Finland are way worse than compared to neighboring countries. So I think kind of nuclear energy can provide their kind of a non-emission electricity production, which then can be used for the synthetic fuel production example. This is once again small detail, and from practical point of view, that how does the legislation incorporate these different ways to produce electricity?
Yeah, that's a good point. That how we, this is an old. If you think about how Germany started the energy transition, Energiewende, it was defined initially as a transition away from nuclear, and a little bit the same in Sweden. And they have been running down the nuclear industry for I don't know for how long, but it looks like they're gradually achieving that. So that will certainly change the Nordic market environment. I think there are 10 nuclear units in Sweden, and that's a sizable part of our generation capacity at the moment.
And then the same will happen after next year in Germany also. But what is the impact there? So definitely we're gonna have a learning rate there. That what will be the market impact?
Right, exactly. That's the difficult of the transition that we were discussing. One, because nuclear fits well this kind of centralized system where you have very central production and distribution, and then consumers are rather passive. But when you are moving to this more decentralized system, nuclear is not fitting so well the package.
No, and it's not about nuclear. It's about the inflexible generation in general. But that if you can't react in the changing market conditions, that's your loss.
Yes.
So that's not specifically nuclear, but just all inflexible generation.
Yeah, and it's also interesting to compare really the size of the investments to kind of energy produced. And now I'm talking about energy produced and not really the megawatts kind of. If you have a good wind conditions, which we have up in the north, then we are looking our big project there that we are talking about 4 to 5 terawatt hours of energy produced. And the cost of that is definitely less than 1 billion euros. But then if you look at these nuclear projects and how much energy you get compared to the cost, then you're talking about a whole lot different price levels. So whether that's then ever economically viable to invest into a new massive nuclear production capacities, I think that's really the thing, that who would that be investing into a new nuclear plant.
Exactly. And
yes,
exactly.
Yes.
And I think that from the market perspective, that should happen. That if there is a willingness to invest from the market perspective, let it be. Let it happen. But if we start to see for example, this kind of UK specific auctions for nuclear with like 109 9 euros per megawatt hour, while you can in the Lapland build wind around 30 euros per megawatt hour. It's like, yes, wind is not blowing all the time, but however you need to put the balancing capacity there, still there is a big fat margin margin to or spread between those. So once again, analyze, let's build the cheapest and the most cost efficient system, because then there is less and less reasons to resist this transition. If this is costly, we make decision based on the old hypothesis and old system rules, then this will be difficult. Then you are in the path to that this will cost quite a lot, and then people start to resist this, and that's what we definitely don't want.
Right. Yeah, I'm glad that you confirmed this, that this is because this is also the academic point of view. There was an MIT report on the future of nuclear. It was first published, I think, close to 15 years ago. Then it was updated, and they concluded in the updated version that it looks quite bad, the future of the nuclear, from the economic perspective. But from the technical perspective, there would be enough fuel, there would be enough capacity in principle to contribute significantly to the carbon reduction targets. But the market is not moving forward, and you pointed out the reasons. Of course, there is this, it's not like completely market-driven investment, because you make system-level decisions that what kind of system you allow to develop. Mm-hmm. And if you put the nuclear there, then it's going to preempt many other types of investments. And if you need to have a certain philosophy for what kind of system you want to have, and this discussion is something we would need to have more of it, I think, here in Finland, and of course this is the discussion they are all the time having in Sweden and Germany as well. I don't know how much nuclear we want to talk about, but it's an interesting feature what we have here in Finland in particular, that the nuclear projects are like cooperatives, like that you have practically behind some projects you have tens of maybe even 100 independent entities. So it's not any single individual firm that is undertaking the investment, but it's more like a sort of almost like a sort of consortium of investors that are sharing and making it rather small risk for any individual partner. And that makes it cheaper perhaps in Finland than in other places, which might explain why it happens here. But I want to give a chance. There was a question, was it Susanna was asking about that it's not only the price for CO2, but also price for biodiversity. And there was a reference to Dasgupta report. Now we have from Atte the question actually, and so conserving biodiversity is rising as a key sustainability issue, and along with the CO2 emissions. So this is more complicated, and I think it relates to your business to some extent.
Yeah. Indeed, and I think kind of it's good that's brought up to the discussion as well, the loss of biodiversity, and I think kind of what we should be more and more aware of is our impact when we are producing energy in different forms. I think kind of I think there is a consensus that kind of there is limitations of the biomass, for example, that we have available, and what's sustainable biomass, and definitely, for example, there we should always look at for the highest value added application, because it's a limited resources. And it's definitely not only, or it's kind of if we price CO2 emissions, but we are not pricing in any other factors such as losing the biodiversity, then we don't have the full impact there priced. So I think that's definitely needed when we, to assess when we are doing any big type of system changes. But yeah, I think kind of there's at least what we try to do is that we are aware of the impact that we do when we are producing energy, and we are always trying to limit the impact to the biodiversity, and also make sure that we have the social acceptance for the energy that we produce, and aim for the projects that are actually then also optimizing those angles, human rights, biodiversity, and also the social acceptance in many forms?
That is certainly a very important question, and but I think even the academic question is pending. Academic answer to that question is pending. So how to precisely price it in to the price of CO2. So there are a few questions we have still. Time is running out. But let's quickly go back to nuclear, because this is a question that might be of interest to many. That actually nuclear might be. Eero is asking that nuclear might be used as a balancing power for this for the intermittent renewable production. So it's a strong assumption that nuclear is not flexible. What do you think about that? Well, given your system level experience.
Yeah. Well, you can go check this for example from last year or just yesterday or week before from a Energy Transition Lab. That is a tool that where you can look the European level dispatch on hourly level. You have the prices there, the dispatch for every hour, and once again when looking the last year when we had in Germany, for example, 70% renewables in the system, 60-70% renewables there. Every time the prices went negative, what happened? At least 6-7 gigawatts of nuclear were running all the time. Why? Does it really make sense to run the nuclear at that point and to make loss? Absolutely not. Yes, they can reduce their output, but once again, it's a capital-intensive investment. So are you really building that kind of a massive capex system to do the balancing for the renewables? Yes, it can reduce its output from 100% to 50 or probably even lower, but is it economically feasible? Absolutely not. And there is evidence. Just go back there and look at last year. What happened there when the prices were negative? Nuclear is still running flat out there in the German market. And is that economical? Absolutely not.
And that you can also see in the Finnish market. I think it was a couple of days back when we had during the night negative prices in Finnish grid, and then there you had the straight line nuclear, but actually it was the wind producers that got the production down, because actually it's known that you don't have any cost of running the turbines. You actually want to cut the production down if the price is negative, but the nuclear was their steady line.
Yes, exactly, and then this is the yes, it can be reduced, but if you look at what will happen in the future, more wind, more solar will be put in the system, more price variation we will see, more demand there is to shut down capacity, more to react. Is the nuclear best to do that? I don't think so.
Well, here you have experts. I'm not an expert. So and we are coming close to the end. But given that we have the experts, I would have one question that it's kind of haunting me all the time. That if you think about big tech companies, they are sort of shaping our lives, like electricity was shaping everyday life of ordinary people in the beginning. Now we have we have Amazon, Google, all these companies that are sort of transforming the way we communicate, all aspects of life. So are these companies going to revolutionize also the energy sector? Any sort of quick take-ons? No, I'm so sure you could give a lecture on this as well.
No, I was commenting that before coming here, I watched the previous editions of Kaute Talks, and there we had, I can't remember the name of the person, but representing Google. And in that, his presentation, he went through kind of what Google is doing. But I would think that digitalization is definitely one of the angles that we need to take into account, the energy transition as well. And there we really need this kind of a multidisciplinary kind of groups coming together and think kind of how the digitalization can be used in a smart energy system. So certainly I hope that the big tech is also taking this serious, and I'm pretty sure that they are having a big investments into this sector.
Yeah, and absolutely, and they are already doing that. Been working with Google, for example, how they are using their data centers already today from the west coast to east coast to shift load. And let's look at it from the Finnish perspective in 3 minutes. Now we have a Google as a scenario. Google have in Hamina big data center, and it's growing. It's already 140 megawatts and growing fast, consuming a lot of energy. At the same time, Google has bought PPAs for wind power in Finland, I think the biggest share. So they can buy cheap renewable energy. They consume massive amount of energy that they can shift the demand. If not from Finland, it's not in Finland, they can shift it to Ireland in a split of a second. So it's now running 140, it can run 60 in a next second. Nobody sees any difference in the service level, but they have this opportunity. So they know how to buy renewables, they have the demand response from their own load, and now what Google is doing, Google Home, they will come to, they know a lot about you, probably even more than you know about yourself, what you are doing there. Then you got the electric vehicles there, you have a Google Home. So imagine what an opportunity for Google to provide cheap energy with flexibility if they can consume this combined, and they will, and they're doing cheap renewable energy. They are running their data center with 100% renewable energy. They got this demand response capability. They connect your device. They will still start to sell electricity to you, that how you are using your equipments there and giving you advice. Because in the end, it's all about the information that don't go to sauna now, that it costs you more and more. So are they in the better position to do this than some Finnish municipal company? I would definitely look at that as someone who will change the market for the incumbent players. Absolutely.
So this is a perfect place to stop. This is the future, perhaps. And thank you, Matti and Mika, for coming here. It's great to have the experts here. And thank you also, Kaute Foundation, for having this opportunity. We could continue. There are questions coming through the chat, but unfortunately, all good things must come to an end at some point. And thank you for joining. This was the last of the Kaute Talks, and there is a lot of work to be done. And let's go to work. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you.